Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Marvel Crisis Protocol character spotlight. Today we are looking at Danny Rand, the Immortal Iron Fist, and yeah, we're gonna get right into things. But real first, before we do that, I do just want to apologize real quick for the last couple weeks that have been a bit of a content drought for the channel. I do apologize. I got sick at a really inconvenient time, so. I didn't get around to doing any sort of streaming or recording or anything like that for a little bit, which was really, really annoying. But hopefully we'll be able to get back to regularly scheduled, weekly, if not at least bi-weekly battle reports, and hopefully keeping these coming because I think these videos are really good for hopefully you guys, but also just for the channel and keeping consistent content going while I'm back in school and I might not be able to do quite as many battle reports as I was before. So, anyways, we're gonna be talking about Iron Fist today, and yeah, I think we'll jump right into his card here. So, if memory serves me, Iron Fist does not change at all on the back, so we're just gonna talk about the front side of his card here. He's got 5 health. He's a medium mover, size 2, 3 threat with a 3-3-3 defensive line, so nothing too special there for a 3 threat. That's pretty standard. He's got 3 attacks. The first one is going to be an energy builder called Chi Strike. It's range 2. It's throwing 5 dice out. He's going to gain power equal to the damage dealt, and it's got a wild stun, which I mean, for a builder, that's quite a good wild condition to have. Of course, it is after the attack's resolved, so if he spikes on that, it'll matter a little less. But if you're only getting 1 or 2 damage in, that can actually be a pretty big deal if you get it on someone while they're at full health or something like that. So already really solid builder. Of course, it is only range 2, but it's also hitting energy, so that's a really solid side to be hitting. Next, we have Flying Kick. This is the longest range attack. It's going to be physical. It's range 3. It's only throwing 4 dice, but to make up for that, it is a gainer, so you're always going to gain 1 power no matter what happens. And after the attack is resolved, you're going to place him within 1 of the target. Really important here that it is after the attack is resolved, so if you KO the target with this, you don't actually get to place. Um, but otherwise, super, super good ability for getting him into range and gaining him a little bit of power. Usually, if you're making an early game attack with him, it's probably going to be this one. And then you'll start switching into the Chi Strike as soon as you're in melee range, unless their physical defense is significantly lower than their energy. But yeah, it's a really solid gainer there. Gives him a little bit of extra mobility, which is huge for him because he doesn't really have any outside of that. And then lastly, we have his spender, and this is kind of the reason why you bring this model most of the time. It is the Iron Fist. It's going to be range 2. It's going to cost you a whopping 8 power, which is crazy expensive. It's going to throw 9 dice out, and it's got a wall of text here. Before damage is dealt, other enemy characters within 3 of the target suffer 1 damage, so you got a little bit of an AoE on it. Can be fun to kind of finish off a character that wasn't the target if you had them real low. And then also, before damage is dealt, if the target character has an activated token, it's going to gain the stagger condition and be thrown small away from this character. So if the target's already activated, you're going to stagger them and throw them, which is really nice. That's a size unrestricted throw, notably here. And then if they do have an activated, or sorry, if they do not have an activated token, they're going to gain an activated token. So that's absolutely huge. You can have your 3 threat walk on up to something like, a 6 threat or even a 7 or 8 threat and just be like, yeah, you know what, you didn't want to play this turn anyways. So really, really powerful attack there. Of course, it does cost you 8 power. It is only range 2, but super powerful being able to just hand out activated tokens with a model. But as we kind of noted, his builder and gainer are nothing too special. So how is he getting up to that 8 power? Well, he has Immortal Weapon during the power phase. He's going to gain 1 additional power, meaning he's going to be gaining 2 every power phase instead of 1. So that helps him build up to this a lot faster, combined with things like Flying Kick and hopefully building 1 or 2 power off of Chi Strike. Typically, this model is more than capable of tossing one of these out by round 3 if they didn't do it round 1, and we'll talk about some of the ways you can kind of push for that in a little bit. But lastly, on his card, before we get into that, we have Master Martial Artist. This is how he stays alive a little bit more. If he is defending against a physical or energy attack that is targeting him from within 3, he's going to add blanks in his defense roll to his total successes. So that's obviously a really good ability. We've seen Martial Artist on tons of characters before, and this one's basically just better Martial Artist. It's from within 3 instead of the typical within 2. It's really good. It turns that three dice into something a lot more consistent because suddenly you're adding, I believe it's two die faces, so now you're blocking 5 out of 8 sides of the dice, which is actually really, really good. So yeah, that's solid defensive tech that isn't enough for me to necessarily say he's a tanky model, but definitely helps him stay alive from a lot more than a 3 defense 5 health would generally make you think. So overall, yeah, Iron Fist has a really unique kit in the sense that he has that super expensive stagger, or not stagger, spender, that's basically either a stagger and an unrestricted size throw, or a activated token, which is super deadly, but otherwise there's nothing really too special about this kit here. I mean, he's an energy attacker, which is always good, and the Iron Fist is also an energy attack that is just casually throwing 9 dice. There's a lot of things that is a good chance to just take down. So that's always something to consider with it as well, is sometimes, you just want to throw 9 dice at something. I don't think it would be worth 8 power if that's all it was, but still, sometimes that's some just decent utility for it. As I mentioned, on the flip side, he's not changing at all. He is the exact same over here as he was on the front. Although typically, once he's been flipped over, that means he's probably sitting on enough power to use the fist because, I mean, that means he's taken 5 damage. So hopefully, you've done something to give you more than 2 power at this point. But obviously, exceptions apply depending what killed you and if anyone sapped away some of your power or anything like that. So Danny Rand here is part of 3 affiliations. He's going to be a Avenger, he's a Midnight Sun, and he is a Defender. Now, a couple weeks ago, I would have told you he's pretty much never playing in Defenders, but I honestly think Iron Fist is a solid pick in all 3 affiliations. I don't think he's necessarily in love with any of the leaderships from any of the affiliations, with one exception, and we'll talk about that in a second. But personally, I think his favorite places to be are affiliations that are giving him a little bit of extra power. So in general, something like Steve Rogers, original Steve Rogers Avengers would be really good for models that kind of like to save a little bit of power here and there. But you'll notice that none of his superpowers are superpowers that cost power. They're just passive superpowers. So he doesn't have any active or reactive abilities, which means Steve Rogers 1 is actually kind of useless for this guy, which is always an interesting thing. Although for what it's worth, having bodyguards with Iron Fist is really useful because you'll find a lot of games if you play him a lot and if your local meta kind of knows how to deal with him, that he tends to get targeted out as soon as he's threatening that Iron Fist, as soon as he's hit that 8 power. And if he's within range 3 of anything, because of course the range 3 will get him to place beside them so he can Iron Fist. He tends to come off the table really fast, so keeping him beside someone who can kind of help keep him alive, because like I said, the Master Martial Artist is great. It improves his survivability a lot, but it's not typically enough for me to consider him bulky. He can definitely still go down quickly if your opponent doesn't want to give him a turn. So I've definitely had games where this model just gets taken right off the table. So keeping him with some form of bodyguard or something like that can be really, really huge. So I don't hate him in original Steve Rogers, but for the most part, I like him with characters whose leaderships are going to give him more power. So even things like A-Force, where you're going to be able to pass him power every time anyone on your team is damaged. Things like the what's the new one that's passing out power? The new Cyclops, I actually really like him with. I like him a lot in Inhumans because Inhumans is going to be obviously one of the best places to kind of play around with passing power between different characters. I think there's a small argument for him in some of the other power generating factions like Red Skull Cabal, even maybe Red Skull Master of Hydra. I think he's okay with both of those. They're not particularly perfect for him because he is only throwing 5 and 4 dice attacks, so he's not always doing damage with these. Um, for Red Skull Cabal. Red Skull Master of Hydra is decent, but I find it's a little bit too low on the power generation side for him to really consistently benefit from that one either. I mean, even if you're getting it every turn, it does just change him to 3 power per turn instead of 2, which still means without, making some attacks and things like that, you're still not getting this until round 3. And ideally, you really want stuff that's going to let him get it on round 2. So that's why I think like things like Inhumans, A-Force, Cyclops, those types of leaderships really, really benefit this model. in a big way, which unfortunately, of course, none of his affiliations kind of do. But I do think he doesn't dislike any of the affiliations that he does have access to. We'll go over them relatively quickly here because, like I said, I don't think they're necessarily the best places for him, but I don't think he's a bad pick there either. So as far as Avengers, we already talked about Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers doesn't really give him anything, but he does enjoy having a bodyguard around. So if he can kind of stay close to Rogers, he'll benefit from that as he would from a bodyguard in any affiliation. Similarly, I think new Steve Rogers, the one coming with the new core box later this month, actually. Oh wow, that's getting close. Um, while I don't think he dislikes that leadership in any way, I mean, being able to guarantee the wild stun, or not guarantee, but significantly improve the odds on the wild stun, is definitely solid. And pushing through extra damage on a builder is never a bad thing. So I think it's decent there, but he doesn't love spending power. I mean, he is kind of all about trying to build up for that Iron Fist attack. So it's one of those awkward things where it's like, if you're doing it on the builder, great, but I find a lot of the times this guy is kind of leading with his gainer, so it's going to be one of those situations where you're not always really going to want to spend that power to change the die. So it's not quite as useful as it might be with some other characters. That said, I don't think it's bad in any way. If you're doing it on the builder, of course, and it causes you to do any amount of damage, then you're gaining back the power that you spent. So definitely not a bad thing there. I just don't think he particularly gains much from that, Steve. Whereas I think other leaders, like I mentioned, do a little bit more for him. Hulkbuster, we're not really going to talk about his leadership. It technically helps his survivability a little bit because he is very susceptible to throws, but I don't think it's really worth noting in any major way. And then, of course, Sam Wilson. And I do think out of all of his affiliated leaderships, Sam's is probably his favorite, just because it gives him a little bit of extra mobility when other models start dropping, or if he does get targeted out, then it's giving one of your other models mobility to kind of come in. That mobility could also be used to heal him up a little bit, so if he is getting targeted out, or at least somewhat, you can bring him back up a little bit, and because he is counting blanks, he's a little bit more annoying for your opponent to take down. In addition, that short move, of course, the mobility is great for getting you in range of the Iron Fist, but it's also great for getting you in Master Martial Artist range. So now all of a sudden, you can be counting blanks when previously you might not have been if they'd started targeting Iron Fist. So in general, there's a couple benefits to Sam's leadership. So I do think Iron Fist is pretty solid, and of course, he's a three threat, and Sam Wilson likes to generally run wider teams with a few more models on the table. So in general, I think he's all right there. And that's personally where I tend to run him is under Sam Wilson, Captain America. I think he does quite well there. But next, he's also in Midnight Suns. For Midnight Suns, obviously the leadership there is Blade, and I'm always very conflicted on whether or not I like him in Midnight Suns. On one hand, he is appreciative of the extra movement. He likes Bump in the Night when it's the difference between being in range of the Iron Fist and not. On the other hand, that one power he has to spend for is usually, like I said, something he doesn't love doing. He doesn't really like spending power unless he absolutely has to. So it's a bit of an awkward situation for him. If he has more than 8 power to do the Iron Fist and Bump will get him in range, then that's absolutely perfect. Like if I don't know, maybe he couldn't flying kick to the target he wanted, so he flying kick to someone closer to him and then he can bump towards the target. It kind of, he can fly across the table pretty quickly with bump and still get the Iron Fist off, which is really really good. But it's just kind of an awkward thing where he doesn't love spending the power. So I don't think it's bad for him. I just don't think it's, again, not necessarily his favorite location to be. Similarly for Midnight Suns, their kind of premier tactics card obviously being Siege of Darkness. He doesn't hate Siege of Darkness, especially if he has a low energy defense model that he can punch with it, but he also, again, doesn't like to spend that power very much. So unless you're fairly confident that he's going to get it back, or if he's already up at, 8 or 9 power when he does it, you typically don't really want to pay for it with Iron Fist. So it can be a little bit of an awkward situation, but yeah, I think Midnight Suns, he's totally acceptable. He's definitely a reasonably good model for Midnight Suns. He's just not really doing his best there. And then lastly, he is in Defenders. And for Defenders, Doctor Strange, I think he suffers from the same problem I mentioned with the others. He doesn't want to pay that power. Changing to, mystic or physical or energy, whichever one benefits best is good. It's a solid leadership ability, but doesn't really do much for him. If it's gonna help him gain a lot on his chi strike, then I guess it's okay. But otherwise, I don't think it's doing worth doing very, very often with him. So he's not really benefiting much there. And of course, Defenders doesn't really have any tactics cards for him either. But then, on the other hand, Daredevil I do think is quite solid for Iron Fist. With something like Flying Kick, he's often finding himself thrown into the middle of kind of a big scrum of models, and the versatility of that placement means you can try and get yourself within two of as many models as possible. So then when you throw that Chi Strike builder, you could pretty reasonably get two, maybe even three rerolls on that attack, and I mean, a five dice energy attack with rerolls suddenly becomes a really good builder, so that can help you build up to the Iron Fist relatively quickly. So I do actually quite like him under new Daredevil leadership. I haven't really had the opportunity to try it out much myself, but I do think it is quite decent there. So for his homes, I think that's kind of covered for what affiliations he likes and there. I think he's at least a solid option in all three of his homes. I didn't mention it when I was talking about them, but he does really appreciate Avengers Assemble on Avengers as well. And to some degree, even Second Wind, because stun just kind of shuts this guy down. He is not a fan of that condition. So, yeah, I think in general, his home affiliations are solid for him, but affiliations that let you ramp up power really fast are probably his favorite places to be. Next, we're going to kind of talk about some of the tactics cards you might want to bring with him. So, of course, we can't talk about Iron Fist without acknowledging that he has a tactics card. It's Heroes for Hire. And he shares this tactics card with Luke Cage, who's another model we'll be talking about in a little bit. If you guys missed it, I did do an entire video on Luke Cage. One of these, I think it was actually the most recent one. So if you're interested in that, go check it out. It was before the update, but thankfully, Luke Cage didn't really change at all. So I don't think my opinions on him really change all that much either. I think he's a fantastic model, and yeah, I talk about Heroes for Hire a lot there as well, and some of the ways you can use it. For Iron Fist, it is a little bit different from how I like to use it with Luke Cage. For Iron Fist, I find instead of trying to use it to keep other models alive, although of course if there is a very important model, holding objectives or something, it can be huge for that purpose, just as it would be with Luke Cage. But because Iron Fist is a little bit squishier himself, I'm a little more hesitant to use it with him usually. So for Iron Fist, I typically tend to try and do a couple things with it. I'm trying to get Iron Fist into close range for things like the Iron Fist. It's a bodyguard attack that Iron Fist doesn't actually have to pay for, so he loves using this card to be able to put himself into range, even off of just like a lighter attack or something like that. If Iron Fist is coming up and you know that this will get you in range to do the Iron Fist attack and maybe build you some power because you're about to take a punch. Of course, try not to do it on a punch that you think might actually take him out. That can always be a bit of a risk, but it can be a good way of bringing him into the fight since, as mentioned, he's lacking a little bit on the mobility department if he's not able to do the range 3 and still have enough for the Iron Fist. So I think it can be really, really useful for stuff like that. In addition, sometimes when Iron Fist is being punched, it's worth it to use it on himself. It's a really niche case here where you want to do it, but basically using it on yourself here, and then of course if you survive, you get to throw away the target. Um, Using the Heroes for Hire on yourself can be that little bump you need because you do get to place yourself within one of yourself then. That'll let you take the hit in Master Martial Artist range instead of, maybe before it was, just out of range 3 but in range 4. So it can be one of those really useful tricks to kind of be like, hey, you thought you were getting around my defensive tech, but no, I don't want to let you do that. And of course, that's especially huge if you do have enough for the Iron Fist and you haven't activated yet, because you really, really don't want to let that be a wasted thing. So, in general, I think Heroes for Hire is a fantastic card for Iron Fist to have with him. I don't know if it's necessarily an auto include unless you also happen to have Luke Cage, but I do think it's really, really good for him. One card that I do think is almost an auto include with him is No Matter the Cost. So I'm not going to talk too much about any other tactics cards. I think these are kind of the big two for Mr. Iron Fist here. but no matter the cost is a really big deal for Iron Fist. So for those unaware, no matter the cost says whenever a character declares an attack action during their activation, it can suffer 1 to 3 damage to play this card. Reduce the power cost of the attack by the amount of damage suffered. So what that means for Mr. Danny Rand here, if I can go ahead and pull up his card again, is that he can take up to 3 damage to bring the cost of the Iron Fist down to as low as 5 power. So suddenly you're able to activate a model for 5 power and and 3 damage on Iron Fist, which, if he can take the hit, that's great. Obviously, if he's taken some damage, you kind of are a little bit more hesitant to do that. But generally speaking, I think the ability to use something like no matter the cost, so then even without any help from whatever affiliation he's in, he can relatively consistently, I mean, let's assume you can get at least one flying kick towards whatever target you want to hit. He can fairly consistently get the Iron Fist in round two, which is really, really big, especially since he could technically do this as the first activation of round two. So, really fantastic combination for him. I think no matter the cost is almost an auto include if you're bringing Iron Fist. It's so, so good with him. Um, yeah, there's not much more to say about it than that. Like if you can steal Prio and I don't know, to say Hulk or Malekith don't get to have a round this turn, absolutely huge. It's just completely devastating to an opponent's game plan sometimes. So he's really, really good for stuff like that. And of course, if you can do it and still have an action to spare to build up some power or something after that, then even better. So yeah, I think that's kind of one of his best cards. Uh, I guess the next and kind of final thing we're going to talk about in regards to Mr. Danny Rand for this episode is characters that he synergizes well with. And there's only a few that I can really think of off the top of my head that are exceptionally good with him. And the first one I want to talk about is, of course, Mr. Luke Cage. So, like I said, we did an entire video on Luke Cage already, so I'm not going to talk about him as a character too much, but their synergy is pretty simple. As I stated, Luke Cage does always appreciate having a bodyguard, or Iron Fist always appreciates having a bodyguard. I think I said Luke Cage does. Um, and while Luke Cage isn't technically a bodyguard, he's a taunt. Same general idea of this is a model that can take the punches for Iron Fist, and Iron Fist really appreciates having that. And then, of course, the Heroes for Hire being available from both characters is just really, really useful. It can play some serious mind games with your opponent on which one's going to use it and when. So super, super versatile. Makes this card really, really good. It kind of just cranks it up to 11. So I think, yeah, Luke Cage is definitely one of my favorite synergies with Iron Fist. Otherwise, of course, we already talked about some leaders that benefit Iron Fist, but I think in general, outside of leaders, you're kind of just looking for anyone who has any sort of bodyguard ability who can help keep him alive, or anyone who can help funnel some power to him. So even models like Wong, I'd say, if Wong's not doing much and you're playing, I don't know, Midnight Suns or something like that, so you got him on the table anyways. He appreciates being able to kind of take a little bit of power off Wong, help him build up a little bit faster. Definitely a good thing for him. But otherwise, you're looking for your things like your Colossuses, who is actually quite a good model now. Black Bolt even, I already talked about him in Humans being able to build up power very quickly, and now that Black Bolt has that really, really sweet. Um, Whereas here, a king serves his people. It's a 1 power bodyguard. I think that's going to be really, really good for Iron Fist. So, I mean, there's a lot of bodyguards in this game, so I'm not going to go through all of them. But if they have a bodyguard ability, they're probably not a bad synergy with Mr. Danny Rand. But yeah, so I think that pretty much covers kind of what I think what I think of Iron Fist and where he kind of stands in the game right now. So as far as, tankiness or damage dealing, he doesn't really do either of them exceptionally well. I mean, the Iron Fist is a 9 dice attack, but it costs you 8 power, so you're not getting it off quite often enough to really call him a damage focused piece. He's more of a utility piece. He's got his one job, and he does that job exceptionally well if you can deliver him because he is going to be targeted off the table. Typically, I like to deploy him on kind of a side flank. I don't want to put him too near the middle of the scrum because I don't want to give my opponent too many pieces to take him down, but I do try to deploy him kind of across from something like a Hulk or a Malekith. So obviously different maps are going to kind of change how that's going to work out for you. But yeah, typically I like to kind of start him off near the side. I'll try to start him with a bodyguard. Very often I'll deploy him beside Luke Cage and kind of be like, okay, these two are going to go together this game and hopefully be able to kind of have Cage help keep Iron Fist alive, and then Iron Fist can be the Iron Fist, right? So yeah, I think in terms of just kind of general gameplay strategies, that's typically what I like to do with him. I that's worked out relatively well for me in the past. Of course, there's always the always the chance that, if your opponent has a good amount of control, they can kind of get the bodyguards away from Iron Fist and then just melt him down with that. He's very susceptible to mystic attacks as well as throws, so you want to try and avoid things like that. If you're seeing that the opponent team has a lot of throws or mystic attacks, maybe Iron Fist isn't the best drop on the table. I don't particularly love him into something like a Magneto because the throws will just take him right down. Three physical defense is fine, but combined with the five health, which is also just kind of fine, throws are just gonna dominate this guy. I mean, two size threes or like a size three and a size two will probably take him down relatively consistently. So yeah, I wouldn't be eager to throw him into those sort of situations. And of course, like I said, Mystic is also kind of a nightmare for this model. Once again, it's just three dice and five health. So if you're playing against something like Convocation or even like a Doctor Strange Defenders, I'd be very hesitant to bring him. I do think he is quite good when you see one of the kind of kaijus on the other side of the battle, whether that's a Malekith or a Hulk or something to that effect. He's definitely a really good model to at least threaten them and make them a little bit scared. Sometimes Iron Fist not getting the Iron Fist off is fine if it meant that Malekith spent his entire turn killing Iron Fist instead of killing your other models that might be holding points or something like that. To that effect, when possible, I try not to have Iron Fist himself be picking up objectives. Between the fact that I'm hurting him myself with no matter the cost and that just being Iron Fist paints a massive target on his back, I try not to give my opponent anything extra for taking him down. So having him not be an objective holder is generally a good idea if it can be avoided. Of course, don't, forgo picking up extracts because Iron Fist would be one of the characters to do it. But if you have enough characters that you don't need him to pick one up, then maybe don't let him keep his power so he'll build up a little bit faster and be less of a target for your opponent. And that'll kind of help him shine a little bit more when he's actually on the table. So I think though we are nearing the point where I've said pretty much all I have to say about Mr. Danny Rand here. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, where you guys like to play Iron Fist and what sort of strategies and tactics you guys use with him. I'm always interested in hearing what everyone likes to do with these types of characters and things like that. So yeah, if you have any fun Iron Fist stories or tactics or things like that, love to hear them down below. But otherwise, that is going to do it for this character showcase or spotlight. I think I'm calling them character spotlights. I mix up my own naming conventions all the time. But that is going to do it for this one. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please do drop a like down below. And if you guys are new to the channel, feel free to drop a subscribe. We're doing videos like these on a fairly regular basis at this point. Before I got sick, I was putting these out give or take every week or two. So hopefully they're going to continue. I enjoy making these. I think they're really helpful for, myself first of all, just to kind of take a moment to actually think about how I'm playing characters and how I might be able to play them better. But also hopefully for any players who are either newer to the game or newer to a certain character and want to get some general ideas on things they can do with them. So we do these types of videos fairly often at this point, and I'm going to be pulling in Reed for some future ones to do some X-Men characters and stuff that he's a little bit more familiar with than I am. In addition, we do battle reports on this channel. Typically, they're coming out every Sunday, sometimes every other Sunday. Now that school's back, it's a little bit more iffy. This weekend, we're hoping to do something with Cable and X-Force. Probably, I was originally going to be doing them up against Midnight Suns, but I'm thinking I'm saving Midnight Suns for maybe like a Halloween special or something now. So, looking more towards maybe do an X-Force versus Asgard or something like that. I really want to showcase some more of the new updated characters. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned because that should be happening this weekend, fingers crossed. But yeah, otherwise, that is it for today. So have a great day, everybody. Peace.